Relly Mangubat, you're watching Drum Basics. Today we are going to talk about mic mixing. Alright, right now we are in the Bath Cave Studios control room, and I'm very proud to share with you guys that I'm using a Yamaha 01V mixing console. This is one of the original digital consoles of one of the great drummers that we all know, and his name is Dave Weckl, and that's one of the reasons why I bought this console. It's because I'm really a big fan of this amazing drummer. So just to share, this is purely my idea. However, it's a bit influenced by Dave when he's using his or mixing his drum set with this console. Okay, but for me, if you would notice, I'm technically using channels 1 to 7. This is for my snares and the bass drum and the toms primarily. Okay, so here the first one is actually snare 1 and 2, these two channels here, and this one, the third channel, is the bass drum, and all of this 4 here are the toms. Okay, so just to give you an idea, this is a general idea of how I mix my drum set. Okay, apart from you tuning your drum set to your most comfortable tuning, what I do is I level the drums like this. So snares 1 and 2 would have the highest level. Okay, if you would notice here in the faders here, it's almost up. Okay, then the second higher level would be the bass drum and the floor tom here. Okay, the reason being is because we want to make sure that we have more control in terms of dynamics for those 4 drums. Okay, for the snare drum, the reason why it's high is because I play very soft notes on the snare drums, and the best way to capture that through miking is a high level of volume that you added to those mics. For the floor tom and the bass drum, however, it's a bit softer than how I level the snare drum, meaning or because of the reason you might get feedback if the mics are angled incorrectly, and we don't want that in a live situation. However, the other toms, which I play an 8, a 10, and a 12, all of them are on the same level here. That's 4, 5, and 7. Okay, so they have all the same level, and they are the most soft among the levels of the volume. Well, just to explain that, it's because the vibration of the toms are much longer than the other drums, and if they are a bit higher or the same level, chances are you'll get a feedback on those drums, and we don't want that on the live setting. If you would notice, all of my drums here, okay, would have almost the same leveling, right? Almost the same leveling. So from the snares 1 and 2, bass drum 3, and floor tom 6, this would be the same level, and the 3 toms, all of them on a straight line, not much of a difference. Alright, so right now, let's talk about angles. And well, if you guys are good in math, this is the time that you apply angles, shapes, triangles, those things that we learned in high school and grade school. So at this point, I just want to share with you the difference of angling your microphones, your drum mics, and what difference it would actually make in terms of sound. Okay, let's talk about the snare. Okay, the main snare is actually tuned the type that well, it's a personal thing, but it's the tuning is what I like. It feels right to me. Okay, however, if you would notice, the microphone here is pointed towards this top here, this area here. So it's not entirely pointing here, but I pointed it here. Okay, I've learned from one of the greats, Todd Schockerman, from the band Styx, that the sweet spot of the snare drum is not actually in the middle, but it's in this area. So when I learned about that, I changed my miking to point for it to point to this direction, the sweet spot. And when you hit the snare drum, I'm not sure if you can hear that. It sounds more full. Okay, I'm hitting it at the center. You see, if I hit it here, it sounds different because the mic is pointed here. Again, if I hit it here, this is how it sounds like. Here, can you hear the difference? Right? There's more volume when you angle your snare mic to the point where you are going to hit it. So it's not just adjusting or angling your mics in general for all of the drums, but it applies to your personal playing style where you normally hit the drum set. So when you play, so I hit it here, see? So if I play the snare, I normally, you have to know yourself to do this though. You need to identify your good and bad habits, should I say. Things that you cannot identify when you're playing live. So that's the importance of you recording yourself in gigs, so you would know the mannerism, your personal mannerism, your habits, where you hit the drums on a comfortable level on your end. So for me, I have two sounds that I can make on the snare, which I usually apply during gigs. So when I do a backbeat, this is where I hit it. Okay. When I do fills, this is where I hit it. So there's two different sounds. Okay. So notice when I play the groove. This is where I hit the snare drum when I make the fills in the center. I'm actually controlling the the mic angle, right? And it gives me two different sounds right away. So this would actually help you when you record your snare. If you're aware of this and you're doing a recording, it is best that you know what's going on, what the mic is picking up when you hit them, right? So for me, for the snare drum, and it applies to this auxiliary as well, snare drum is angled towards where I play the backbeat more, which is this side, okay? And make sure that I'm aware of playing what particular part of the snare when I do the grooves for the backbeats and for the fills when I do the, you know, filling up, making orchestrations. Alright, so moving along, in terms of the floor, or I mean the toms, okay, both the floor and the hanging toms, the mic angle would be pointed towards the center. In this case, the reason why I do that is because that's a sweet spot of the toms. For me, when you hit that part, it gives you a much wider sound. It's spreading more than when you hit it on a higher or low, towards the edge of the toms. So that's where you get more tonality and spread, as I said, sustain. Okay, it allows the drums to breathe and resonate more. So just to give you an idea, that's something that I I always do. An idea, what I mean is I'm gonna play those toms. Okay, so all of my toms are angled like that. The mics are angled like that, and this is how it sounds like. Okay. Alright, for the bass drum, in terms of angle, this is a much different mic angling, should I say. Okay, the stand of the bass drum mic goes straight inside the drum hole, the bass drum hole. Okay, what I do is I make sure that the edge of the mic hits the middle of the bass drum. This would create a more bassy sound when you when you play the bass drum, right? The sustaining factor will be more, right? However, it's not going to overpower the other toms. Okay, I want a more bassy sound because this would actually add to the bass guitar's punch. Okay, so when you play with the bass guitar, normally it requires you to um, to extend what the bass player is doing, and that extra punch would actually come in handy if you have that bassy feel. All right, so the angle of the stand is actually 90 degrees, exactly like an L, right? And at the end is the drum mic, okay, the bass drum mic. So it points towards the beater head, okay, exactly where the beater hits, and it sits in the middle of the drum inside. Alright, so the last part that we will be talking about is the condenser mics towards you getting that sound for your cymbals. Okay, so these are one of the example of a condenser mic, and if you would notice, what I normally do is I put in the condenser mic, pointing it towards the one that I usually use in the kit. So what I mean to say is the ride cymbal and the hi-hat, it points directly towards the center of the ride. Okay, so I can get full coverage of the ride cymbal. Okay, so this is the reason why I'm doing that is because these are the cymbals that we ride and we hit to make a groove with. Okay, so the focus of the condenser mics of my cymbals would be towards those two cymbals. Okay, so since the cymbal is actually functions like a gong, and it accentuates, it gets more sustain, right? Whether there's a mic or not, it still sustains more than the other drums. Okay, and it spreads all over the place. The only thing that I'm actually concerned about is me getting that clear note sound when I play the ride and the hi-hat. So technically, since they are pointed towards them, those two cymbals gets more levels in terms of the mic capturing the sound. Okay, and all of the other cymbals would be stationary, since the cymbals have their very unique sound, separate sound. They would actually punch through, right, the condenser. Okay, the condenser would pick them up. Okay? With in terms to leveling it with the faders, the level of the cymbals for me would be the much lesser than the levels of the toms. So they get the lesser level volume of a cymbal, because we'd want to hear when we actually play or record ourselves. We want us to hear the notes more, and for them not to be overpowered by the sound of the cymbals. So technically, the role of the cymbals to accentuate would actually be adjusting your faders would actually adjust to that. Okay, if you needed more sound of the cymbals, technically you just increase the volume a notch higher, or really depends on what you want your recording to sound like. But for me, more drum sound, lesser cymbal sound on the recording and in live. When you play live, you don't want your cymbals to be, sustaining more. Okay, so less effects as well. For me, live and recording should should not be as much of a difference when you set up your mics. It should be the same. You should have that consistency in sound, whether you play in a recording in a studio or on a live setting. So for me, for my mics, if you would notice here, this particular mic condenser is pointing towards the um, um, nut of the cymbal stand that holds the cymbal. So I point it directly towards that. So here, on this side here, you would actually see a picture of my hi-hat and its condenser mic doing the same thing. Okay, here, you would notice it here. So technically those mics are the same. They receive equal height leveling, and they point directly towards the the hole of the cymbal, towards this nut, towards that hi-hat clamp. Um, so this would actually allow you to get a more focused, more sounding hi-hat and ride. The effects that you add for the snares, since I want a more hall chorusy sound, it gets more effects than the other drums. Midway through would be the toms. All of the toms would receive the same effects. It would really be up to you and how your dynamic skills would identify the sound of your toms. And the bass drum and the floor tom would get the most, or the most softest or minimal effects that you can add. This is for us not to allow feedback in our playing, okay? that's the end of this episode. This is a bonus episode of Drum Basics, which talks about miking on your miking your drums and how you level it. This would actually help you on a recording situation, and would give you some ideas on how to angle your mics on a live setting. I hope you enjoyed this extra video, this bonus videos of video of Drum Basic. So tune in to the next season for more of the drum lessons, and which would actually feature my favorite songs and my favorite drummers and artists. So again, my name is Relly Mangubat, and you're watching Drum Basics.